Now call this regular meeting of the Jacksonville City Council to order. I want to welcome everyone who's come out tonight for the meeting and also those who will be viewing on G10 television. To begin the meeting tonight, we are going to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Council Member Cindy Edwards, followed by an invocation by our City Attorney John Carter. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for this day, for the blessings you so graciously continue to bestow upon us as a city of Jacksonville and upon us individually. We especially give thanks for you sparing us yesterday during the storm, where so many of our neighbors to the south had such flooding and have to now begin the process of rebuilding. We pray for them, and we pray for that rebuilding process, that you would be with them and comfort them and support them. And we pray that as we're in the midst of this hurricane season, that you would continue to protect our island, fragile island coastal area that we live in, that you would protect our city and our citizens and keep us safe from storms. We pray for our military who are serving us here and around the world, for their anxious families, many of them in harm's way. And we pray for our mayor and our council, that your guidance and direction would always be with them. All this we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Council, everybody should have had a chance to review the agenda for tonight's meeting, and I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda, adding a resolution document and authorization to sell 18.5 plus or minus acres within the Jacksonville Business Park as a consent item.
Move approval with the adoption of the resolution consent item.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Next, we have the minutes from the September 3rd, 2024 workshop meeting and
Public comment first, Mr. Mayor.
oh, I'm sorry. I just miss that all the time, don't I, for some reason. Okay. Public comment. It's now time for a public comment portion of our agenda, and this is a time that the council has set aside during each regular meeting to hear comments from the public. This is not a question and answer session, but a time for you to express your views on city issues to the council. Each speaker who signed the public comment sign-up sheet may come to the podium when I call your name. Please state your name and address for the record. You may speak for 3 minutes. When the timer at the podium and also displayed on the screen turns yellow, this is a signal that you have 30 seconds of time remaining, and you may wish to wrap up your comments. And we do have some additional, oh, never mind. We'll go on to public comment. We have Mr. Brad Newton would be the first.
My name is Brad Newton, address 2292 Onslow Drive, Jacksonville, North Carolina. Good evening, Council. As I said, my name is Brad Newton. I'm here today as the founder and CEO of the one and only community transformation company called Community Investment Group. To update you on one of the largest private investments in the history of Jacksonville at over $40 million. We came here 2 years and 4 months ago after purchasing Town Center Apartments in order to transform almost 700 apartments on approximately 90 acres into a flourishing community that provides, as you have stated, so desperately needed affordable housing. Just today, I was informed that there are over 3,000 military personnel on the waiting list for housing, yet I stand here today confronted by the problem I thought I would have your support in solving. Unfortunately, that has not been the case. So because I have a fiduciary duty of accountability, in my hand is what last Friday the 13th you were served with, a federal lawsuit by one of the largest and most powerful law firms in the nation. They've invested almost a year to try and help us work with you and be treated both fairly and legally as we should have been the whole time. As clearly spelled out and documented in that lawsuit, Our constitutional rights have been violated, along with many other illegal acts, and it is time to hold those responsible accountable. With all that being said, I want you to know I still come as I came the very first day, in peace, actually in perfect peace, as I know God made CIG the steward of Town Center Apartments. And like I said the first time I met you, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to stay. The ownership is permanent. My goals and intentions have never been wavered. I have continued to invest both my time and resources to ensure the success of this critical transformation. We as a company have grown tremendously, both in size and in capacity, since we first met. We have transformed many other communities across 4 states, thousands of apartments, all in the same time frame. We have been stopped from doing so here. Now, just like over 2 years ago, you have an important decision to make. And again, we are inviting you to help be a part of all the great things we have done and will continue to do that are in the best interest of the city, of the council, and all the great residents that call this town home. My prayer is that as you go home tonight and you look in the mirror, that you ask yourself 2 questions. Am I doing everything possible in the best interest of the residents of this town? Am I helping CIG deliver the most important housing this town so desperately needs? As one council person quoted, over 6,000 missing affordable apartments. We have over 10% of them I can have ready very quickly. I know tonight, just like every night, I will sleep well knowing I am doing what is right and what I'm called to do in transforming this community. Are you ready to embrace the change and help me? We would appreciate your help greatly. The time is now. May God continue to bless our transformation of new Town Center, and may He get all the glory. Thank you.
Melanie Marzette.
Hello, Melanie Marzette, 403 Alta Vista Loop. Hope you all enjoyed your summer. I'm back. I wanted to talk about something that was discussed over a year ago when Jack and Miette was reopening, and that was to name the program activity room after Miss Mason, Diane Mason. We had the conversation, and that never took place. I don't know the proper procedure, so I'm here pleading my case. Ms. Mason started off as a parent volunteer many, many years ago. Her children came through our programs, and so did her grandchildren. She is known as the mother of recreation. Because of Ms. Mason, you have Adulting 101, which was teen nights out, girls' night out, boys' night out, because of what she started. This person lived in the community, she lived in the river, and she served Jack and Miette well. People my age, I'm 55 and younger, definitely know who she is. There are still people who come up to me today that does not realize that she's passed on. But when they hear, they are saddened. Ms. Mason was a great inspiration to us all. There's not one person that you could find that would say a negative thing about her that I know of. We had the conversation, it was agreed on, and like I said, it never took place. Whatever cost needs to occur for that to happen, I don't have an issue with picking up that tab, but I want to do the right thing by her. Some of you in here know Ms. Mason. You may have had children who came through the program, or cousins or nephews or whoever, know that she was a mainstay in New River at Jack and Miette. She worked all over, Kerr Street, Northwoods, some of our city schools, and I just want her to be honored. When they celebrated 25 years, we were in tears because they didn't mention Ms. Mason, and she should have been mentioned. That was a sad oversight, and it should have never taken place. So I'm asking you all to look inside yourselves and do the right thing, not just by her, so her children and her grandchildren who still currently live in Jacksonville know that their mother, even though they know that anyway, she made a difference, but that she made a difference to the city. And so that's all I'm asking for tonight. Thank you.
Now we'll go to the adoption, and let's see, where did we leave off at? Adoption of the minutes and the consent items, and the minutes were from the September 3rd, 2024 workshop meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That brings us to item number 3, and this is a street closing order. John Carter will be presenting this. So this is dealing with the alleyway between Newbury Street and Stratford, 310 Stratford Road.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. At your August 20th, 2024 meeting, excuse me, you adopted a resolution of intent to abandon this alleyway, as the mayor has indicated and shown on this map, is behind the Little Bean Cafe. And it's just that section of the alleyway that's hatched here in black. You can see there where New Bridge Street and then Stratford Road is there. The person who owns the property where Little Bean Cafe is located and the lot behind it, and I'm going to show that to you in a moment here, is Mr. and Ms. Robert Rush. Mr. and Ms. Rush came to us probably 4 to 6 months ago, and they said they would like to have that alley abandoned. They had some ideas. At that time, it was, since they owned the Little Bean Cafe, they needed a place to put a storage unit that didn't have enough room in there to do it in different things. So the first thing we did, in working with Wally and with our engineer at that time, was to go out and to identify where all the easements were. That is, where all the pipes were in the ground. So in some of these areas, there's no easements. As you can see here, the green now represents the alley that they're asking the council to abandon. But the yellow is where we have pipes in the ground, and Mr. and Ms. Rush have agreed if you abandon the alley, they will give us, and that was attached to your agenda, they will give us an easement over that so that we can go in and we can replace, repair, or whatever's necessary for those water and sewer easements there. So the question is, why in the world would they even do this? Well, one thing is, gives them a few more feet. The law basically says that there is a 20-foot setback from an alley or a street before you can put a structure. Here, from the easement, there is no setback. They could put their structure, if you will, right up against that easement, as is indicated here. So it gives them a few feet, especially not so much for in their interest on the Little Bean side, but on the large tract of land behind there that goes from actually the cemetery all the way to Stratford Road. And again, I think in the future you'll see them coming back asking you to do some rezoning, but that's not part of this conversation at all. But they will want to do some rezoning because they have some plans to quote, redevelop, end quote, this area. But again, that's for a further discussion. But that is the request before you tonight, to abandon the alleyway in exchange for the Rushes giving to us, the city, the yellow hatched area there that will cover the sewer and water pipes that we have in the ground. I'll be glad to answer any questions, Mayor and Council, before you do your public hearing, Mr. Mayor.
Council, any questions?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, John. With that, recess the regular meeting and open up the public hearing on this matter. Does anyone present wish to speak on this issue?
I have a question.
Come up to the podium, please. And please state your name and address. For
My name is Philip Johnson. My address is 121 Stratford Road.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I understand it clearly. He said the green part is the part they want to eliminate. I run and operate the business right beside that on 900 New Bridge Street. Will that be closed behind it too?
No, sir. That's the barber shop. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
No, sir. That it will not.
So
be
they just
closed.
want to close it directly behind the coffee shop?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would say, Mr. Mayor and Council, Mr. and Ms. Rush are out of town, or they would be here this evening, but I did communicate with them, and they plan, if the council takes action favorable, they'll be here tomorrow to sign the easement, and we'll get all the documents recorded.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak on this? Close the public hearing. Council, you've been asked to approve the closing of that section of the street.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Next is item number 4, and this is a rezoning of 310 and 316 Hargett Street to office and industrial and neighborhood commercial. Jeremy Smith will be presenting this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This is a rezoning request submitted by Roxta Beckel Incorporated. It is for 1316 Hargett Street. It is a .74 acre parcel of land. It is the project site noted on the existing zoning map before you on the screen. The property is currently split zoned 3 different ways: residential multifamily, low density, neighborhood commercial, and office institutional. So they are requesting to rezone this entire parcel of the .74 acres to neighborhood commercial. When staff received this request, we also identified that the church, Living Hope Community Church property behind this one, was also in a similar position. So with this request to rezone 1310 to all neighborhood commercial, staff is also recommending to rezone 1316 Hargett Street to office and institutional. The Campbell Land Use Plan supports both these proposed rezonings, and the city mapping would look like this if rezoned. So pictures are 1,000 words. This is the puzzle piece that the zoning creates right now. If approved, the zoning would change and be more uniform to the existing zoning in the area. With that being said, the city staff and the Planning Advisory Board are recommending that City Council approve these rezonings based on the evaluation found within the staff report and the findings of fact A through J being found in the affirmative. The rezoning advances the public interest by eliminating parcels that are split zoned and a non-conforming use. That non-conforming use would be the church with the split zoning. Rezoning it to O&I would now make it a legal conforming use. If the City Council has any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Mr. John Pierce, representative of the applicant, is in attendance and be happy to answer any questions as well.
Council, any questions of Jeremy? Any questions of Mr. Pierce?
Jeremy, I got one question. Where exactly is that convenience store?
On the aerial here before you, you'll see that it's right there in that front. It is on the parcel that was
Right.
submitted for rezoning.
Where's it?
It is near the corner of
Right.
what the map shows is Onslow Drive, but it goes back to the Whispering Pines Old Folks Home and the SBI's unit building there now, right next door to the Living Hope Community Church.
All right,
See,
thanks.
the marker isn't working. I would circle it for you.
Yeah, I got it.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
This time, we'll recess the regular meeting, open the public hearing on this matter. Anyone wish to speak on this particular matter? Mr. Pierce.
John Pierce, 405 Johnson Boulevard. I'm just here, I think that the store's been there years and years. It was a convenience store. And what he wants to do is open it back up as a convenience store only for the area growth. And I think when it complies with all the county land use plan, and I think it would promote, it would be a convenience for the people living in the neighborhood. And I think it's a mess when you got one piece of property with 3 different zones in it. I'm just trying my best to clean it up. And I think if I understand it correctly, I didn't realize they were going to add the church with it, but it would correct that non-conforming use as well. So I'm glad they did, but I'm here to answer any questions that Mayor or Council might have of me. Thank you.
Questions, Council? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to this matter?
I do. So I'm just trying to get an understanding. So with the rezone, you can open up another convenience store in that area or whatever?
Mr. Smith wants to speak to that right behind you, Melanie.
Okay.
I can address that. So if the City Council may recall, in March of this year, we changed our rules on convenience stores and vape shops, tobacco shops. So while the rezoning would now, if approved, it would rezone the property to neighborhood commercial, a convenience store would have to come back to City Council via special use permit. So that use would be back before this council if they choose to go forward with that.
So a convenience store can actually sell vape vaping and stuff of
They
that nature?
can, but they are limited under the new rules to a certain percentage, or it cannot be primarily involved in the sale of tobacco and vape. That's how we adopted it in March of this year. But at the same time, city council will have that opportunity to place conditions in anything via special use permit if they go that route and come back before this board.
Yeah, my concern is when the composition of that community, when they do come back, people do come back in that area, is the vape issue, so, but we'll address that at that time.
Legal and all kind of other stuff too.
Any other questions, Jeremy? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to that issue? All right,
So I
seeing,
wasn't finished.
yes, ma'am,
You answered the question.
step back up, please.
My whole concern is that when I spoke a few months ago, it was the same thing. You already have, I don't know how many gas stations in that area, and they sell about the same thing. We can pretend that we don't know, but we know. And so in that area on Hargett Street, do we really need another convenience store? And do we really care about the people who eventually, hopefully, whenever this town center stuff is done and over, and people do move back in that area, do we want kids to be surrounded by a bunch of vape shops and where they can go and buy beer and wine, a block up the street or 10 steps up the street? It's already congested over there. And when's the last time any of the city council, and if they don't lay at your doorstep, but when's the last time you've been over there and actually even commune with the community over there? Because there is still people, although town center is closed, New River is made up of a bunch of houses that surround that whole area. When's the last time anyone has gone over there and had a conversation or even had a community meeting? Because I can remember the last one we had, and it was a whole bunch of promises made, and so far, we've not gone through with it. Jack and Miette's been open for a while now. So you need to have a community meeting and really get to know the neighborhood and ask the people what they want or need over there. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I will say that we've discussed with neighborhood improvement, and we're actually working on having a meeting over there.
Good.
So,
We'll close the public hearing in this matter. Councilor, you're being asked to consider the proposed request. That would require a motion.
Mr. Mayor, in order to clean up the zoning in this area, I move that we approve the rezoning request accepted, the evaluation found being A through J being found in the affirmative. It advances the public interest by cleaning up the parcels that are split zone and eliminates a non-conforming use.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hear none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Next, we have item number 5. And this is the zoning of the Jim Parker Road area to residential multifamily and high density. Jeremy is going to be presenting this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a proposed zoning of the 3 properties the city annexed earlier this year along Jim Parker Road. The existing zoning before you shows that there is no existing city zoning on this property, nor is there existing zoning in the immediate area, as it is a satellite annexation. If this property were to be, these 3 properties that total approximately 40.87 acres were to be rezoned to the requested high-density residential or residential multifamily high density, the KMA land use plan would automatically be updated to reflect high-density residential. If rezoned, the zoning map would appear as such. Again, the B&M developers have submitted this request to rezone it or to zone it residential multifamily high density. With that said, this is a required zoning. The city has to establish zoning by state statute. City staff and the Planning Advisory Board are recommending that the City Council approve the map amendment requested based on the evaluation found in our staff report. with the findings of fact A through J being found in the affirmative, that the zoning brings the property into compliance with the City of Jacksonville Unified Development Ordinance. Mr. Jason Houston and representatives of the applicant are in attendance. They would staff, along with staff, would be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Council, any questions of Jeremy?
Thank you.
This time I'll recess the regular meeting and open up a public hearing on this matter. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this issue? No takers. I'll close the public hearing. Council, you're being asked to approve that request.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the rezoning based on findings of facts A through J being found in the affirmative, and that this zoning will comply with the City of Jacksonville's Unified Development Ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further, nobody else discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we go to item number 6, and this is funding for the Joed Strategic Plan. Josh Ray will be presenting this item.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a request to council coming from staff this evening. Staff is requesting the council to appropriate $30,000 from our Economic Impact Fund from the economic development side to help fund the strategic plan for Jacksonville Onslow Economic Development. This request did not come from Joed. It came from the entities wanting to fund this strategic plan. The strategic planning process for Joed is very important based on what we're trying to figure out our direction for the future, not only for Joed, but if you recall, Onslow County is currently going through a strategic planning process right now as well. Hopefully you've made input into that one, and we would hope that this city council and multiple members of the community will have input into the Joed strategic plan. Currently, Joed has 3 partners: Onwassa, Onslow County, and the town of Holly Ridge. And the city of Jacksonville, as we've discussed previously, would make the 4th partner to fund this strategy. The chairman of Joed put together a subcommittee that was chaired by Susan Edwards. She had a process set out so that we put an RFQ out. We brought in some applicants, then we brought that down to a final 3, selected those 3, asked them to submit an RFP, which gave us a price proposal. That subcommittee did interviews for each of those 3 firms, and we made a recommendation back to the executive committee of Joed. However, they can't approve that contract officially until the final numbers have been submitted for the funding agency. So the request before the council tonight, Mayor, is for council to give us the go-ahead to utilize the funds that were appropriated in the FY25 budget towards the Joed strategic plan. I'd answer any questions, hopefully more eloquently than my presentation.
Questions, Mr. Ray?
Not a question, just a comment. I think it's really good that the strategic planning is going on. We need data-based decisions moving forward and not just gut checks, so it's a good thing.
Mayor, even if it's not a question, Ms. Edwards' point is very good. For the strategy for Joed is to determine what we need to do as a community moving forward, and to look at some of those areas that are important, not only in a retail and in industrial and commercial sectors, but to figure out how all those things tie together, and then to look at which communities are opportunistic for that type of development. So I think the partnership is excellent. As we talked about at our post-budget retreat, Joed's one of our strong partners, and this is a good step in the right direction for these 4 entities to show support for something that definitely includes all of us.
Anybody else?
I do have a question. Maybe Councilperson Edwards can answer this for me. I know Joed had actually, I know they were supposed to have a low-interest loan program for minority businesses.
They do. They do.
They do? Are those funds available?
They actually had, excuse me for jumping in.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
They actually received a grant from Truist that was slated for minority business owners. All those funds have been allocated and loaned out at this point. It was only $100,000. So.
Do you know how much money each applicant received?
I do not. There was somewhere around 25,000 each. I think there was either 3 or 4 applicants, or recipients, excuse me.
Is this something that happens on a yearly basis or every other year?
This was a one-time deal at this point, and the person who got us that grant is no longer working for Truist. She has switched banks, but part of what the strategic planning is hoping to do is to recognize some other opportunities to where we can have business loans. Obviously, they need money. There are some grants out there. They have applied for some grants to do some additional funding, but at this point, they don't have anything that I'm aware of off the top of my head other than what we've just discussed.
Okay. Thank you for that.
And that's something that could be included in the strategic plan also.
Yes, it will be.
Mayor, to add on Mr. Warden's comment, Joe Ed did receive a grant recently from Duke Energy, similar type of grant, and that can go into some of the operations that Joe Ed has. But that just shows the need for that funding pathway for us to figure out as a community as we decide how we're going to move Joe Ed in that direction. So I think part of that strategic plan, Mayor, you're spot on. It will determine the need, and then it'll determine how we fund those needs moving forward.
What I hope is that we will come up with some way in our budget discussions that we're going to be doing in November, and then potentially as we work through our 25 budget, or actually the next year's, how do we want to fund Joe Ed besides just operations and admin? Do we continue to buy new land and look for opportunities to help them? And do we contribute money to some small business loans and incentives, however you want to phrase it, and help out that way too? So that's something I think we'll be discussing a little further as we work through this.
It would be great as we rebuild in downtown to actually be able to help some businesses to actually fill some of those buildings. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Wright? All right, thank you. Councilor, you've been asked to approve that funding for this strategic plan.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second.
Second, please.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. All right, we're going to shake things up a little bit here and move on to our report section for this evening. And I'll begin with you, Mr. Jackson.
No report. Yes, Mayor.
I'd just like to remind everybody the National Night Out is October 1st, so that's coming up. It'd be nice, there won't be 1,000 degrees outside, so hopefully everybody gets out and enjoys that. And it'll be a little darker earlier, so the fireworks might happen a little sooner too, so.
You'll provide the air conditioner, should it?
Yes, sir, yeah. We called from up north to bring it down, so, but that was just a reminder about that.
Thank you.
No report?
No report.
No reports.
No report, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we will now take our, let's say Mr. Ray's got he's got his report and some One City moments.
Thank you, Mayor. I know usually I don't get to speak twice, so it is shocking to see me stand here, but I appreciate the opportunity. I do want to lead with, our prayers are with Chief Yanero tonight. We've been given updates just on his recovery and his health, so just know that we continue to pray for him and Faye as they need our prayers. For One City this evening, we do have a couple of things that we want to share with council. The Onslow Civic Affairs Committee hosted a 9/11 remembrance last week at the Lejeune Memorial Gardens. Members of the Jacksonville Public Safety, the Jacksonville Fire Honor Guard, Jacksonville Youth Council, and the Civic Affairs Committee participated in the ceremony. As always, we had multiple members of City Council and the community that did the pre-recorded voicing of the stories about individuals that lost their lives on 9/11, serving others in their capacity. And what an amazing event to honor those that we have lost. You can see Pam Trafton here with the Youth Council. It's great to have them here. The crazy thing there is members of our Youth Council weren't alive when 9/11 happened. And so for them, it is an educational experience, but it's amazing to have their involvement. So to Pamela Trafton, thank you for being involved. We also had music provided by the Jacksonville High School Orchestra, Dixon High School Choir, and the 2nd Marine Division Band, as you'll see here on the pictures. Ceremony included stories from the victims of the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and service members who were killed fighting the war on terror. As always, our community does an amazing job of remembering those that have served in multiple capacities. So great job by the Onslow Civic Affairs Committee for not only being present, but for pulling us together as a community. The other item we have tonight, Mayor, is the Caring Heart Tour. Clients from a Caring Heart visited Jacksonville City Hall September 16th as part of their tour provided by Jacksonville Transit and Jacksonville Tourism. A Caring Heart case management provides services to adults and children with disabilities. For us, it's an awesome opportunity to welcome them to City Hall and to get them to and from this facility. And it's great for us to have them come into City Hall to be active and be a part of the community. So very thankful for the partnership with Transit and with tourism, and we're most thankful for the members of A Caring Heart. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Carter?
No report, Mayor.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a short recess and move to A and B to discuss the housing policy development. Okay, we're going to go back in session now, and we'll go to item number 7 on your agenda. This is the housing policy development. We have DFI, representative from DFI with us tonight, and also Tracy Jackson will begin the presentation. Tracy, it's up to you.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Just wanted to bring forth your consideration, an update on our housing policy development. Wanted to give you some information about the Development Finance Initiative of the School of Government. It was established in 2011, and we call them DFI for Development Finance Initiative, and they partner with communities in North Carolina to attract private investment for transformative projects by providing specialized finances and real estate development expertise. So I just wanted to bring up our partners, Ms. Sarah Van Leer and Mr. Frank Morocco. They're going to give us an update on our housing policy. And as you recall, you all adopted this policy in September 2023. It was a policy that was established to bring housing opportunities here in the city of Jacksonville. And we also wanted to establish some priorities and some policies, procedures with that policy. So they're going to come and give you an update about what they've been doing for the last year. Okay? All right. Come on, Sarah and Frank.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much for having us here today. We're excited to be here and to meet you and to begin a number of discussions that we'll have with you along the way that relate to our scope and the findings that we'll present to you once we get to the end of our scope. So what we'll do today is talk through our full scope, our site identification process, what that includes, so that we can just have a discussion about what you can expect through our work with you, where we'll kind of end, and what those results will look like for you in order to inform your next steps. So we'll present today, we'll come back to you in October, and then we'll come back to you in November. So it's really, it's gonna feel fast to you, although we've started our work with Tracy and the team a few months ago. So we're kind of hitting our mid-stride here. So as I mentioned, we'll review our scope. We'll also discuss a number of different affordable housing development terms. It's a lot of terms that get thrown out there with all sorts of different definitions. I appreciate that look there. And so we'll spend some time just thinking through and talking through about what we mean when we say these certain terms. And you'll hear them kind of over and over again. So we'll just kind of preview that today. And then lastly, we'll spend a little bit of time at the end really wanting to hear more from you about your housing priorities and how the work that we're doing over the next several months is going to help you meet your housing priorities. So first, as Tracy mentioned, the Development Finance Initiative is a program of UNC School of Government. We work, as you can see here, all across the state to help bring about transformative real estate projects, supporting cities like you, figuring out and finding out how to enter into sustainable public-private partnerships to bring about their goals to reality, to kind of get the private sector to do and meet your needs. So we kind of think of ourselves as like the middle ground. We're providing technical assistance, capacity building. We're also providing the kind of through line, the mediator between the public sector and the private sector that sometimes, I'm sure as you all have experienced, sometimes talk past each other a little bit. So we're, part of our role is to help kind of bring everybody to the same page. The benefit of being a part of the School of Government is every community, every project in every community is different. There are all sorts of different dynamics at play. And because we're housed in the School of Government, we have just a whole plethora of experts to draw upon for whatever kind of nuanced situation, questions, ideas, and opportunities come up. So that's really the benefit of us being a part of the School of Government that has a long history of being a research organization, a training organization, and advisory organization for the state. So our scope with you is kind of what we term as an opportunity site identification scope. And we'll talk in a lot more depth on the coming slides about what that means, what kind of different parts of our scope are. But really, first, I want to start off with our goals of our work together. And that is to define feasible opportunities, feasible projects that you could take a next step on. DFI is a very action-oriented organization. So our goal is to build confidence and capacity in the city of Jacksonville to pursue really concrete affordable housing development opportunities that we think could have the potential to lead to actual new units on the ground. So that's our goal and our work with you. We have done this work, as I mentioned, across the state, but I want to just bring to light a couple of examples that are affordable housing examples in our recent portfolio. Our first is a project on Ferry Road in Asheville, North Carolina. We've been working closely with Buncombe County to assess the feasibility of a mixed income development on 65 plus acres of land to the south of Asheville's downtown. And this master development plan, there's a solicitation out right now for qualified development partners to bring about a development that is mixed income, mixed housing types. It includes kind of a variety of rental and home ownership opportunities. And over half of the units planned in this development, or anticipated in this development, would be to serve low to moderate income households there in Asheville. The second is a more recent partnership that between the city of Brevard and a local Presbyterian church. They have undeveloped land that they are in ownership of, the church, and so they want to figure out how to bring about affordable housing on this asset that they have close to Brevard's downtown. So we're really kind of in the early stages, in the midst of understanding the feasibility of development there. So next I'll get into our work with you is a little upstream from those examples, but really forms a foundational step to understanding what kind of opportunities you can move on most immediately from our perspective. So what we'll do kind of first is do a housing market and needs assessment.
We'll be back here in just a few weeks, actually, at your next workshop meeting to present to you the details of our housing market and needs assessment. So we'll be back soon with that information. And really the goal of that assessment is to determine the demand for different kinds of housing types based on your economic drivers and your current housing market. So we're excited to be back soon with you on that. A second part of our scope is stakeholder engagement. So we spend a fair amount of time doing quantitative analysis for your housing market and needs assessment, but numbers, as you all know, kind of only take you so far, right? You can only know so much from looking at the data. And so a really important part of our work is to talk with your stakeholders to really understand the nuance and the context, the why behind that data, and really to kind of ground truth some of that information. So it really helps us to speak with them, to really understand the kind of current dynamics, and to be able to bring a more nuanced set of findings to you based on their feedback. The other thing that's talking to, oh yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned low and moderate income. What does that mean?
That's a great question. We're gonna get into a lot more details on that, but to answer you up front, that is focused on households that have an income level below 80% of the area median income in Jacksonville. So that's when we say low to moderate income, it's 80% and below is how we define that. And we have a chart in a couple of slides that shows you what does that mean in terms of actual income that's being made by that house and household size. So we'll dig into that much deeper. The other thing with stakeholders that's helpful is that as we're talking with them, they, of course, have lots of ideas and thoughts about housing and housing priorities in Jacksonville. And so that's a way for us to hear their feedback and feed that back to you as a part of our findings to help kind of shape and inform the work that you're doing going forward. Next, the next part of our work is a site identification process where we'll identify physical parcels, actual sites, where we think affordable housing development could happen in Jacksonville. And we use a couple of different criteria for that. As you can see here, it's kind of a stacked layer of criteria. One, we look within municipal boundaries, so we're really focused on, we're working for you, the city, so we're really focused on the city. Not ignoring on the periphery the county as well, but really kind of centered in on the city. We take into consideration topography, such as flood zones and wetlands, so that we're thinking through, obviously, a site that can actually support physical development. We take a kind of a priority look at land that is already owned by the city or the county, but we also take a look at privately owned land that has the potential pathway for site control by the city in order to move forward. So we're looking kind of across a number of different ownership dynamics there. We tend to look at sites that are a little bit larger, 2+ acres, although certainly not ignoring infill development opportunities. And then one of our big criteria is looking at the competitive areas for low-income housing tax credits. So you can see here the map is showing Jacksonville's competitive areas for these federal resources that go to support affordable housing development in communities across North Carolina. So one of the things I want to just note is kind of why do we take that LIHTC lens? Why are we thinking about those low-income housing tax credits? And like most federal programs, it's not perfect, but it is the most consistent source for new affordable housing units in North Carolina over the past 2 decades. And so when we're really thinking about a feasible development, one of the things that goes into that is the financial feasibility and the kinds of resources you can get and attract to be able to move that development opportunity forward. And so LIHTC is kind of really a consistent source of resources for that. So we thought we'd spend a little bit of time talking about the kind of core of that program. So number one, LIHTC is a federal source of equity. It's cash infused into a project that developers can use to either build new or rehab affordable housing units. This source of equity is pretty critical in affordable housing development because the rents on those units are below market rate. And so a developer can kind of only get so much financing, debt financing, to build that building. And so that tax credit equity really helps lower that financing gap. It's a critical source of resources for that. This program can be accessed by private or nonprofit developers. And the level of tax credits that you can receive really kind of fall into two categories. One is called a 9%. That is more money, but it is also more competitive with other development projects across the state. And then there's a 4%, which is a lower amount of money, but is less competitive. So it's kind of in some ways easier to get access to those resources. They come with other stipulations. One of the things that we'll do is we'll spend a lot more time. This is a brief overview of the LIHTC project. But as we dig into the housing needs assessment, as we dig into our final recommendations for these sites, we'll dig a lot deeper into this so that we're really parsing out the nuance of what does it mean to have this 9% project here versus what does it mean to have a 4% project. So don't worry, we're gonna dig a lot more into that together as we go along. As I mentioned, these projects, these awards can go to public or nonprofit developers, not local governments. The projects have a minimum affordability period of 30 years, and that there's built-in monitoring and accountability to these low-income housing tax credits. The state agency, the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, monitors those awards to ensure affordability for a minimum of 30 years. And then lastly, the income requirements really range. So again, kind of to the earlier question, these are all focused on low to moderate income households who are making below 80% of the area median income or below. But depending upon the award, getting back to that 9 and that 4% and a number of other factors, the affordability kind of ranges across 20 to 30 to 40 to 50% of the area median income. So again, we'll dig into a lot of that nuance together as we look at more specific and concrete site opportunities. Lastly, the last part of our scope is a high-level site and financial feasibility analysis. And really the goal for that portion of our scope is to take those sites that we've identified and really look at the physical opportunities and barriers that may exist on that site to get in place kind of a core base layout that would be possible, the number of units, the number of parking spaces that might be needed. If there are priorities that you all have for community spaces, other amenity spaces, that's where we can really begin to physically lay out what that site might look like. And then to also kind of really importantly estimate the potential private funding that you could attract for that opportunity and identify the minimal funding gap that the city would really need to consider as their role in that project in order to move it forward. So a couple kind of quick example. This example doesn't relate to any site in Jacksonville, but just to kind of give you a sense of what you'll see when we come back to you with those final recommendations. You can see here the kind of just broad level physical layout, and then an overview of the site. What are kind of key considerations of that site? And then we tend to take kind of a minimum maximum approach to those development scenarios. One, to answer a question of how many, if you were to max out this site and get as many units as you can get, what does that look like? And if you were on the opposite side to minimize the financial gap that we estimate for that site, what does that mean in terms of the number of units? So to kind of really give you the bounds of what's possible on that site. So here's where we get into some more of the terms. We spent kind of a lot of time talking about the scope, but there's, as I mentioned, all sorts of terms that we'll be using along the way. And one that I've been saying a lot is affordability. And our team really defines affordability in a way that is in relationship to a lot of the federal programs and federal funding that's out there, knowing that that's a key source to bring about these projects. And affordability, really, no matter your household size or income level, is really if you are spending 30% or less of your household income on housing-related expenses, then you're living in a housing unit that is affordable to you and your household. And that includes, when I say housing-related expenses, that's your rent, your utilities, or maybe that's your mortgage and your taxes and your insurance, housing insurance. So in total, if those expenses equal 30% or less, then you're in a unit that is affordable to you. When you're spending more than 30%, you get into what's termed as housing need. And housing need is both defined as you're spending, it's a cost definition as well as a quality definition. So you may have housing need if you are spending more than 30% of your income on housing-related expenses, or you may have housing need if you are living in a house that has poor quality or it's overcrowded. So there's a number of ways to think about that need, and that'll be important because as we talk about affordable housing and the households that you're serving and the need that currently exists in Jacksonville, this is really kind of the basis of that definition.
So when it's said affordable housing, question is to ask, affordable for who, right?
Yes, affordable for who and at what income level, which I think gets to our next slide, which is what is affordable housing? How is that defined? There's one version of that, to your point, that's defined based on income. There's another way to think about affordable housing, which is the type of affordable housing, and you really have two types. One that is not restricted by income, looking at that household and what can you afford based on your income. And the other is restricted by income, so it's taking into direct account your household income and ensuring that you're not spending more than 30% of that income on your housing-related expenses. So the not restricted by income, we kind of lowercase a affordable housing is naturally occurring affordable housing. And it's usually naturally occurring because of location, maybe it's not like the best location or quality, a number of other market factors that can lead to something being naturally affordable. The kind of issue that some households run up against with that naturally occurring affordable housing is that it is susceptible to market changes. It could be affordable to you now, but maybe isn't affordable to you when that location becomes more attractive, or that there's quality improvements that then has impacts on your rent. So there's not a set amount that you're paying and can depend on in naturally occurring affordable housing. Versus what we define as capital A affordable housing, which is based on your income. It can be publicly or privately owned and operated and managed, but it is based on that household's income and is capped based on that 30% mark. And so that leaves the household in that unit kind of more, I guess they can really focus on that stable amount that they're going to be paying and aren't susceptible to those market changes. There's a lot of other terms that get thrown out there, like workforce housing, attainable housing. There's a number of different ways that people talk about affordable housing. We kind of stick to this definition because we can really define it both with federal terms, with data, with a number of other factors. So as you're hearing and having more conversations about affordable housing, I would just always encourage y'all to ask how it's being defined and kind of understand a little bit more about what that person might be talking about and how it aligns with some of these definitions here. So to dig in a little bit more on that low to moderate income household and what that means in terms of income levels, you can see here on the left side, there's that area median income level. So if you're spending if you have a household income that's 30% of the area median income, you're considered an extremely low income household, making, if you look across the top, it kind of changes by household size, but generally around $20,000 a year in that kind of range, up to approximately $61,000 a year if you're kind of at that low to moderate income level, and let's say you're a 4-person household. We really have kind of centered ourselves in a lot of ways on this 4-person household column because from what we have seen in the data so far, The low to moderate income households in Jacksonville are by and large families. And so there's a number of different ways to think about a 4-person household and the number of earners and the number of dependents. But what we see in the data is this kind of focus on families and families who have housing needs in Jacksonville. Now, those are a lot of numbers, but who is that here in your community? If we think about that kind of extremely low income, that's typically your wait staff, retail positions and occupations in Jacksonville that are making around that $20,000 to $25,000 mark a year. Up to a nurse, these are just examples, but a nurse at Onslow Memorial Memorial Hospital, which would be more around that 80% AMI level. And that second line is showing you what that person in that occupation could spend on their housing in order to not experience housing need, to really only be spending 30% of their income on housing-related expenses. This line shows you what they can afford. Right now, from what we've seen, kind of current rental rates in Jacksonville are around $1,300 a month. That includes a range of housing types.
Sarah, let me ask you a question. Those percentages and the incomes, does that take into account the base as well? So when they do the average for the area, it's usually with the base. So those are all including the base numbers.
Yes.
You're talking about their salary.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Are you talking about their salary or are you talking about the BAH?
BAH.
BAH. I'm talking about
The BAH is not.
Let's talk about salary.
Yeah, it's a great question. So these AMI numbers are actually set at the county level for each county in the United States. So these are the rules that are used for the low-income housing tax credit projects or Section 8 or some of the other programs.
Be salary.
Yeah, exactly. but it will be salary, and they're set at the county level. So this is taking everyone into consideration.
But our rents and mortgages are actually they're considering the BH and all that stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. It's on top of that.
Yeah. Which will just know our housing needs assessment will dig a lot deeper into the impact of the military presence here. There's a lot of pros, and there's also certainly some challenges that exist as a result. So we'll dig a lot deeper into that when we see you next in October.
I got another question.
Yeah.
What does site control by city or county mean if it's owned by someone else?
Site control can mean a couple of different things. One, it can mean that you are pursuing a path to purchase the site. Most often when we are in our process with you, if you are wanting to pursue next steps on a site to really understand and deepen the feasibility analysis, what we often recommend is getting an option on the site so that you can understand what is at a nuanced level. This is what we're doing with you is high level, right? The kind of second phase would be a deep level site-specific analysis. And getting an option on a property enables you as the city to explore at a deeper level, to commit kind of more time and resources to that, but without purchasing the property and then taking that kind of full risk on the site. So there's a number of different ways to think about site control, but we often think about it as an option where if the results are this is a feasible development and you should really move forward, then the time and resources that you've put into that aren't lost, and you have your risk is lowered. You have control to be able to move forward. So in Jacksonville, you have over 6,500 households with housing need currently. We'll dig into these numbers again in a lot deeper of a way in October, and they are a point in time. But 6,500 households, LMI households that have need. Out of this total, there's nearly 2,000 households with severe housing needs. And what that means is you take that 30%, spending over 30%. Severe needs is you're spending more than 50% of your income on housing-related expenses and potentially living in lower quality or overcrowded housing. So let's just kind of look at an example of how that plays out. How do you get into a position of being kind of having severe housing needs as a household? Say you're a household with you're a family of 4. Your income is $23,000 a year. You're at that 30% AMI mark. And you're renting the average rental here in Jacksonville and spending $1,300 a month on your housing-related expenses. That's 70% of your income on housing, which leaves you approximately $600 left over to take care of your food, your childcare, your healthcare, your transportation, et cetera, all of the other things in life beyond your house. So this is significant because these are the households in Jacksonville that are kind of at the greatest risk, right? You're kind of already living at the margins financially, and if you have any kind of get a flat tire, you lose your job, you have a medical emergency, any number of things can cause that scale to tip even further. And so these are some of the experiences that your households are having here in Jacksonville when they're making that level of income and experiencing that severe need.
If we looked at today, that's roughly 10% of the households in Jacksonville. That 6,500 would roughly be 30% of the households. So just do the math backwards from what Sarah was talking about.
Yeah.
6,500 is roughly 1/3, and the 2,000 is roughly 1/10. So when we're trying to figure out where that impact goes, that's the number of people. 1/10 would represent roughly 7,000 people in our population. So that's a real number. It's not just 7 people that are being impacted at that level. So when we talk about that tire, or even think about the one prescription that's a higher level prescription instead of a $5 prescription. A $50 prescription could really punch you in the gut. So that's where it brings it back to, so we know it in terms of those concepts, those real life applications, the number of people that we're talking about when we develop policies and plans as a city.
That's right. Yeah, great point. Other questions that are top of mind? I have some discussion questions for you all, but wanted to make sure that we reserve some time for additional questions from you.
Do you have any local projects here, or what's the closest area where you might have a project?
The closest area, that's a good question.
That's a good question. We've done a couple. Lumberton is one that comes to mind off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I'll think about a couple of
We'll get back to you on that. We have a whole project list, and I'm trying to scan through it now. Yeah.
Flip back to that map. You got them on your map. That was on there too.
That's true,
exactly. But I'm thinking about affordable housing projects like Lumberton is
yeah.
You know, and one good example of a project that Sarah just mentioned is that Buncombe County project. For anyone that remembers, Avril worked for the city of Jacksonville. Avril's now the Buncombe County manager. And so part of our discussion has been, there's a knowledge and a familiarity for our team, and now that she's part of that leadership team in Asheville Buncombe, here's a project that we can talk to their team directly when you're looking at how do you make these things happen. And that's a unique opportunity there because there's Asheville Prime, which is one world, and then Buncombe's a totally different world. So they've got a partnership project there.
Yeah.
And then that second one in Brevard that Sarah pointed out, that's other communities that we know people that are working in those areas. And that's a unique project because it's kind of it really is a public-private partnership with a church. So it makes it even
and
more creative.
Faith communities have for a long time have had a central role in thinking about affordable housing for communities. I think we're seeing a trend now of faith communities who are willing to get creative and really kind of think through what are the tools at hand, how do we get this done. They're seeing this in their congregation, in their surrounding communities, and wanting to be able to meet that need as a core part of their mission. So
You've done some very innovative things there, because I know the Veterans Organization with Tim Driscoll here, they did something with the faith community in Asheville.
In Asheville.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
That's where the ministries.
Right.
And with these church partnerships, Tracy already has 2 partners that we've had dialogue with to say, if you're interested in this type, then how do we make it happen? And so I think there's a value there as we're looking at how does the city maximize the partnership? Well, with DFI, they know the strategy. They know that example for how potentially you can bring that concept to fruition. And so I think that's part of what the value is for us as a team is bringing in that experience so that we can figure it out. But this being an entry-level discussion, we're still trying to figure that out as part of the strategy.
Well, and these projects often can't happen in a silo. They really do take your local partners. And so there's a lot of different ways to think about that partnership and how, who you're working with locally to kind of to move that opportunity into reality. So as you think of, I'll just kind of take this minute to say there's a lot of information we provided. Each discussion we have will be kind of full of information, and you will maybe have ideas or thoughts or questions that don't happen right now but are tomorrow or next week. And I want to hear from you. Our team wants to hear from you. The more we hear from you and your thoughts and your questions and your ideas, the more kind of robust information we'll be able to bring back to you. So I just want to encourage you all to reach out kind of anytime to talk through this in more detail or dig into some of the numbers in a way that maybe we can't right here due to time constraints or anything like that. Just want to encourage you all to reach out to us. The more we hear from you, the better the whole project will be. Well, so with that, I do have kind of a couple of questions for you all. I'd love to just hear more from you all. As you think about Jacksonville's housing market and your housing needs, what are you hearing most from residents? What really sticks out to you as you're talking to your constituents? And that might be from individual constituents, or it might be from public or private sector employers. Just what are you hearing?
One of the things that come to mind for me is that you've had people, I guess it's like that 50% level, that they were renting, and because of the person that was, hold a mortgage or who owned the house, they decided to sell. Or, if you can buy this, you can do it, but you can stay in the house. But if you can't buy it, then we're going to, get another seller that can afford it. Then that person has to go out and look for housing.
That's right.
So it's like the possible working homeless is what I call it. And then we're not taking in, we probably need transitional housing because we have a large influx, and I know it's going to get worse, of the homeless population. You're getting folks that come down here from New York with one-way tickets. That's not
That's what you're seeing a lot.
It's coming from different directions, so.
Absolutely.
So that's a big issue right now.
Yeah.
Migrants are being shipped everywhere. Small towns, Springfield, Ohio just comes to mind. They just had an issue. We're certainly not immune. Somebody could decide that they're going to ship migrants here. And that's something that we would have to face and absorb. The cost, big cost, and sometimes. When you have a big city like New York City that's struggling to pay and figure out how they're going to handle that, all the migrants that they've got up there, that's puts a strain on the budget, puts a strain on the community. The people who are living there feel like they're being given short shrift sometimes because the city government seems to be bending over backwards to accommodate the migrant influx, but not taking care of the current residents, perhaps. So, a lot of moral issues as well as physical issues there.
Yeah.
But in some cases, we've had migrants even in the counties working, and they were already living in substandard housing.
That's right.
So now it's bringing to light. It might look like they're coming from other places, but they've been there in a lot of cases.
Working in your economy,
Right, already here.
It is a lot economic. The more and more households are finding themselves slipping down that ladder because of inflation.
Yeah.
Their pay
is probably not keeping up with their costs of living. And I think it doesn't matter where you are on that percentage, if you're at the top or the bottom, everybody has felt the increase in prices and changes and having to make some adjustments. But
absolutely,
if you were at 75 and thought you were okay, and then you wake up today and you're 50
you're at 50%,
because
yeah.
that, you know, property was reassessed and gas prices have gone up and milk now costs and diapers and you know,
all
all of it. It's, you know, more and more folks who didn't think they would be in housing need or find themselves in housing need just because of, you know, they're still bringing home X, but now everything else costs Y.
Well, rent's going up, childcare is going up, food's going up. You know, it's like when that layer just keeps stacking.
And then with COVID, and you got more people that's portable in terms of how they can work.
Right.
So you got people bringing salaries from up north and other areas that see, hey, we could be near the beach and live cheaper. So that then caused an issue with you know, the amount of housing we have available.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
One thing I hear too is a lot of need for senior housing.
Senior veterans as well. Yeah.
Senior, we got a lot of veterans that retire here. We have, you know, populations that age out of those big houses they don't want to live in anymore.
Small.
You know? We do have a lack in that. I think, you know, where you live, there's a few places, but it's not just strictly senior living over there, is it?
No, not really.
Is with
just
go ahead.
I was just say piggybacking the low income options just are so few, and the waiting list is so long because of a lack of inventory.
Your income changes too as you get older. You know, you're no longer in the workforce. You know, it becomes a little bit a whole different story unless you really got well off from your working.
And those retail folks too, trying to make it.
Another thing that we have seen, because we live in the coastal areas, is the impact of hurricanes. We were impacted, I think it was, what was it, in 16 with Michael that came through, and then when Florence came through in 18, there was a lot of other surrounding counties that were affected that was coming to Jacksonville looking for housing, and it really put a strain on our community. But one question I have for you, is there currently anything that we as the council need to look at in terms are there any type of barriers within our own policies as it relates to housing that might be affecting our citizens? Some of our policies and procedures that we currently have in place negatively impacting our citizens. There's unintended consequences that we didn't realize.
That's a great question. I think one of the ways that we will continue to learn more and more about what those barriers look like is by talking to those stakeholders. As we continue to have those conversations with local developers, with real estate agents, with you know, a number of other folks in the community, we're able to get a sense of, okay, what is the opportunity here and what's preventing you from moving forward. So that's a big part of our process. So we'll bring that to you. We'll kind of integrate that stakeholder feedback as we're looking at these site opportunities, and what does it mean to take that next step, and what might present a challenge as a result, kind of based on the feedback that we're
Another
getting.
way you might see it is that example that Sarah shared, where you saw the minimum and maximum of the development. You'll see this is, you know, the maximum by under Jacksonville's UDO or, you know, whatever the rules are. So you'll see the impact of that specifically through a site as well.
Yeah, good point. Another question we had is, you know, what are some of the biggest challenges in finding housing in Jacksonville right now, and who's facing these challenges most often based on what you're seeing and experiencing?
Well, Councilman Washington, Dr. Washington mentioned Florence. That was a major, major impact on the housing here. Just a sea change, actually. We went from basically a buyer's market where people couldn't give away houses. A lot of the military, when they left here to go to another duty station, would end up having to put their house on the rental market because they couldn't, nobody would want to buy it.
I did hear that from
Yeah.
a local broker recently. He's like, a lot of people become unintentional landlords that they weren't expecting to be.
All of the rental company that I work for had a large increase in the amount of rental units, and then Florence happens, and now it becomes a seller's market, and we're still in a seller's market. It's not as strong as it was, but it's still there, and that certainly impacted.
Absolutely.
So that was a really a major change, and it was obvious and almost instantaneous.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you're
Short period of
still
time.
very much feeling the effects of that, for sure.
Interest rates aren't helping anything either.
They are not, no.
And I think also too with just the dynamics of families that are changing, whether you're talking about single parent, whether you're talking about divorced parent, whether you're talking about the sandwich generations of children who are raising their families, but their parents are getting older.
Yep.
Parents can't live by themselves, so they're having to bring their parents in with
Feeling
them.
elder
The house
dependent.
is not big enough, and if you want to increase, oh my goodness, we're having to send even the little babies out to get a job. It's just the family dynamics is just changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so many different factors at one time right now. That's the issue, probably more than we ever had, you know? So.
You know, one of the problems we have is good problems. People are flocking to North Carolina.
They are.
We're getting our share here too. And,
Yep.
and that certainly puts a strain on the housing market. So
It's one of those double-edged swords.
it is.
Yep.
There's a lot of developers building new areas, just not necessarily low-income housing.
That's right. Yeah.
So-called market.
Yeah.
Market rate.
Yeah. Well, so the last question I have is what, for you, as you're thinking about your housing priorities and thinking about some of the next steps, again, our goal is to bring to you concrete opportunities that you could, feasibly take a next step on, depending upon, a number of factors. What does an ideal affordable housing development mean to you? We're talking about this, kind of what could be, there's not a one-size-fits-all, and one affordable housing development is not going to solve all of the housing, kind of challenges here. But when you think about that first step, what does an ideal affordable housing development look like to you?
Mixed income.
Mixed income, okay.
Yes.
Good.
I was about to say, I don't want to get my hands slapped, but I also think that we have to take into consideration that we enjoy having the military and the benefits of the military that's here, but oftentimes our military families are two military spouses, which they're both receiving the BA, and that works great. But when you are a married couple, civilian, and just two paychecks, no additional money coming in,
Right.
that can oftentimes put an additional barrier on civilian families because they just don't have that extra money to
Right.
pay for housing, pay for their utilities, and they can't keep up.
Yeah.
Because every year that BA increases.
It does, yeah.
And that goal line keeps moving.
That's right.
It's almost like, up in the ante. No matter how many times you spin that wheel, when you finally think you're close, that boundary line moves again.
Yeah.
The disparity becomes a whole lot greater as we go along.
Yeah.
And then another thing is that, it's real talk. It's like you might have a family that starts out as a military family, and then it becomes a single parent family,
Right.
with no one person in the military in that household. And you might have somebody that was unskilled, a mother might have been unskilled,
Right.
that then has to take 2 or 3 retail jobs, and that just creates another totally different dynamic there.
Or they're skilled, but North Carolina yet hasn't passed those laws with reciprocity that allows them to transfer those skill sets from one state to another. So you may have that military spouse being the only breadwinner, and even with the BA, it still becomes a struggle. So it's just not even a piece of cake with our military families.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think too, mixed, we both said mixed at the same time. I think you're gonna get a lot of that, but a healthy community is not all one type of housing.
Right.
You want that mixture in there, but I think part of what we have to remember is making sure we address the low income housing, not leaving, like we hear a lot about workforce and affordable, and that's great if you are a nurse or a teacher or work, and then they have needs and they should not be left out. But if you are working as a hostess or a waitress or a cashier or whatever.
And that extremely low level.
Yeah, there's, or whatever, maybe you're, on SSI or whatever it is you've got for income is grossly insufficient compared to the averages.
Yep.
That crowd needs some options. So I would love to, in a perfect world, in a perfect development, I would love to see that slice of the pie is not left off. That the most vulnerable folks at least get some units.
Yeah.
Like you said, no, it's not a silver bullet. We're not going to solve all of it at once, but don't leave that population off the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mixed incomes, including
the extremely low. Yeah, that's really helpful feedback.
And that's where our strategy hopefully includes all areas where you could potentially subsidize either through HUD or a city allocation for the lower income housing, but you wouldn't do that for a market rate. But that could be part of that strategy as well. The city could purchase land and have site selection, and then sell that or trade that depending on the level of housing that we're looking at. So I think that's that depth of housing that we need to have, and it goes back to the inventory that you were talking about. We want to have all those levels satisfied so that we can. But for the lower levels, you don't subsidize that with these funds, right? That's a market rate for a reason, and so it lacks that city subsidy, but it's still part of our strategy.
What helping people become homeowners? That's a big expense. When people don't do that is because it costs so much down payments and all the other stuff it takes to purchase a house. I think, Tracy, you've done some of those projects in the past. And I think that'd be a big help, to help some people cross that threshold to get into home ownership.
Yeah, I appreciate
And
that.
then teach them and give them the tools to know what to do. It's not just, you don't buy a house, you just stop there, right? There's a lot more steps that goes along with it.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, because your heat pump dies when you don't expect it.
Happens a lot.
That's right.
I mean, we never thought we'd ever get into financing, but usually we had to because, it's a big expense.
Oh, 100%.
Bought one in June, it hurt.
Yeah.
It does, no matter what. Yep. Yeah, that's helpful. Other thoughts for us as we, were you about to? Oh, okay.
Just, we had an issue with the town center and poor quality of dwelling units. And so it's important that a strong management team takes over the maintenance and rental portion of that. That's important. That's something we don't really vet. We're not going to be vetting. We're going to be looking at the developer, but still, it is so important. And when those real estate investment trusts come in, all they were buying was a piece of paper, and they bought the income and could care less about any maintenance issues. They just did token maintenance for years, and it just kept on going down, and it's and we ended up with a mess.
It's a lot of units.
And a lot of people impacted.
For sure.
The heck with our feelings. It was the people themselves that were impacted.
It was 350 families.
Yeah,
And,
that's a lot of
and we had people that were actually military that had spouses in the house. I talked to one guy in particular, and he had to send his wife back to wherever they came from because he was getting ready to deploy like the next week.
And nowhere else to live.
Nowhere else to go. And we made allowances to hopefully create a low income amount of units. And that didn't happen, so.
Yeah.
And that 350 is only half of the total units that are there, the 697. And like you said about, like Dr. Washington said about any kind of storm events that create us losing some of those to a local unit, just like what we saw in Holly Ridge this year. And we talked about this earlier as a team, when they lose a housing development and they have 50 families that need housing, I don't even think we had the inventory here after not being able to track 697 families and then having another 50 or plus families. You just don't know where that's at, because if we don't have the inventory, we can't help them. So then where do they go? They go out of the area somewhere else. I was going to add, Mayor, Sarah mentioned the timeline. So DFI is going to have 3 back-to-back presentations to council. And then if you think about that timeline, it's going to lead us right into the FY26 budget retreat. So we have this discussion. Hopefully we get to that point. So we have this discussion at the November 25th budget retreat as one of those targeted items, because I think it's big for us to talk about how we're going to move forward FY26 and beyond, and that's our goal. Back to where Tracy said, you've got the resolution, and now we're having a plan and a team come in to help give us guidance, and then we want to share that with council so that you can give us the policy and the direction to make some things happen. So that's our end game for this year only, and then after that, then we want to have the follow-up. I would say the follow-up consistently to how we maintain certain programs. So that's what we're shooting for, Mayor, in the process.
Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you very much for
Thank you for your time. Really appreciate you having us. Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. Yeah.
I need a motion to go into closed session. To discuss personnel matters.
Second.